The wind hit the flag hard and it snapped twice. A mailbox slammed shut like a judge's gavel. Inside, wrapping paper hissed against the hearth, the tape curling back from heat. I set an envelope on the mantel just beyond the shine of his new Rolex, and didn't say a word. He noticed the weight of it before he noticed me. "Mail?" He laughed, shaking a ribbon from his sleeve. "Not mail. A finish line. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Caleb. I'm 65 years old, and this is what really happened." The first sound that morning was the snowplow dragging its steel along our street. A long scrape, a pause, then another. The second sound was children squealing 2 doors down when their dog tore into a gift too early. The third was my son's voice, bright and loud from the kitchen. He told someone to kill the Christmas playlist and to bring out the real speakers. He liked volume. He liked to cover things. I stood in his doorway with boots still on because he hadn't offered me a place to put them. The foyer rug had a stitched monogram that wasn't ours. The coffee machine hissed like an angry cat. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter and money spent quickly. He called me Dad the way people call a waiter sir, like a word used to move things along. He leaned around a wreath on the doorway and said, "You made it, didn't think you'd want to, after last month." After last month. The sound of a door closing. The thud of my toolbox hitting the porch because I wasn't allowed inside to fix the loose banister I had installed with my hands 25 years ago. The scrape of the bolt sliding. His voice through the wood. "You can't just show up, Dad. Melissa's uncomfortable." The envelope taped to the glass, my own name on it. The letters too big, too careful. It made a sound when I peeled it off, a whisper of paper that felt like it said go. I didn't answer him now. I nodded at the tree. I kept my hands in my coat. I listened. There was music under everything. A Sinatra record, soft, needle crackling. Melissa clinked mugs. The baby monitor clicked and carried the tiny whine of my granddaughter, settling back into a sleep made of warm milk and ignorance. The living room filled with people I knew by their laughter. His friends from the firm, neighbors who practiced their greetings like lines. I'd built this frame 30 years ago. I remembered where the studs hid behind paint. I could point to the place where the drywall joined. He slapped my shoulder with the way men slap a car hood they don't own. "Breakfast in 5, he said. "You can sit there." A stool near the door. Between the cold and the kitchen traffic. I used to sit at the head of a table that rested on legs I turned in my shop late at night. The chair I made for him when he was 6 had a scratch on the left rung where he tried to carve his initials and stopped when I caught him. The mark still shut. It made a sound when I ran my finger along it, a roughness that sang of a boy who admired the man who'd made him a place in the world. He took that chair with him when he moved out. The sound of the truck was the same sound the snowplow made now. Drag. Pause. Drag. "Caleb," Melissa said, walking past with a tray. She didn't look at me when she said my name. The tray rattled. Her bracelets answered. "I'll stand," I said. "Gives me a good angle on the music." She didn't laugh, he did. Loud, too loud. Over the record's soft hiss. 6 months earlier, I had heard something I was never meant to hear. It did not come wrapped in a fight. It arrived with thunder. It came like a voicemail does when a finger misses the red button and a call never ends. It happened on a Tuesday. The roof at my old place had started to sing when the wind came from the west. A little whistle at the chimney. I was on the stepladder with a nail set in my teeth when my phone buzzed and the screen flashed Evan. My son. I tapped without looking, set the phone on the windowsill and kept working. Voices spilled out. Not a hello, not a hello back. Just my son's tone. The one he used with his partners when he wanted something. "We're clear, right?" "Title in my name," he said. "He's old, but he's stubborn. Don't tell him until it's done." Another man answered. Paper rustled. "The refinance was approved. That guarantor you mentioned. They signed months ago." "My dad trusts me," my son said. The laugh that followed had no weight. "He signs whatever I put in front of him." I didn't breathe. The room held its breath with me. The wind pushed. The whistle at the chimney went thin. "Just make sure the notices go to the condo," the other voice said. "Not the shop. That's the idea." My son said. "Keep him off balance." A door shut on their end. On my end, a loose shingle flapped once and snapped back. I picked up the phone and did not move. The call kept going because he had forgotten to hang up. I heard glasses clink. I heard Melissa's voice slide in. Low. Pleased. "So it's really ours." she asked. It'll be clean by Christmas, he said. What about him? What about him, he echoed. Silence. Then the sound of him sucking air through his teeth, deciding, he'll find out with everyone else. He listens better when there's an audience. I put the nail back in my pocket. I climbed down without making a sound. I had built stairs that didn't creak. If you knew where to step. I knew, that day sound and silence made an agreement in my house, and I kept it. Back to the present. He turned up the volume and the brass section flooded the room. I felt it in my ribs. The baby monitor clicked again, and I watched him adjust the dial the way a pilot adjusts a radio. He liked control, volume, lighting, seating. He asked the room for attention with a spoon against a glass. The chime rang, and kept ringing a fraction too long. He liked that too. He lowered his voice and said, Dad, if you could, let's not make this weird. He smiled without showing teeth. It's Christmas. It is, I said, and I brought something for you. He didn't blink as he said, Great. Gifts go under the tree. Not this one. He watched me cut through the noise. He watched me cross the rug I didn't like, and the hardwood I had laid with my brother before he died. I counted steps because sound mattered today. 3 from the door to the hearth. 2 more to the mantel. I lifted the envelope just into the light so the gold foil trim flashed once. A single, small flare. The song on the record turned from verse to chorus, and the drummer hit the ride cymbal just as my hand let go. It made a neat sound when it met the wood. A soft, definitive tap. He looked at Melissa, then at the envelope. He took it the way a man takes a bill at a restaurant. Like he plans to pretend he doesn't notice the tip line. He skinned it open with a fingernail. Paper. Is this a card? He asked. Laughter from the kitchen came late, as if it waited for permission. It's a notice, I said. Melissa breathed in through her nose. Bracelets stilled. He skimmed the first line and found the words he recognized. Default, acceleration, trustee, sale. The sound he made then was new. A small vowel with nowhere to go. Evan? Melissa whispered. He shook his head. He wouldn't. I wouldn't what? I said. Exactly. He didn't answer. He read the second page. He read the third. He flipped back like the words would change if he shuffled them. A neighbor's laugh cracked down the hall. The record clicked as the arm reached the center and lifted. For a second the room had no music. Only breath. Only the tick of the baseboard heater. Only the baby's soft complaint in the other room. He dropped the papers on the mantel and made his voice big again. It's nothing, he announced. It's a mistake. Dad gets confused. I shook my head once. Read the recording number out loud, I said. Top right. He stared at me. He didn't pick them up. Read it, I said, softer. He picked up the first page and did what he had trained himself to do his entire life, perform under noise. Recorder's office, county of it, he began and stopped when his tongue hit a date. 6 months earlier. He swallowed. His Adam's apple scraped audibly against pride. What is this? He asked. But it didn't sound like a question. It's your Christmas music, I said. A different arrangement. He slammed his hand on the mantel, and the clock jumped and chattered. You can't do this. I lowered my voice. You asked me not to make it weird. He leaned in and said, we refinanced. It's mine. You were supposed to sign. You didn't even show up to the closing. I let the silence sit between us for a count of 4. Then I set down my own sound. A small black rectangle on the mantel next to his new watch. I tapped it once. The phone screen woke and the file name stared up in large letters. Tuesday Roof called. Melissa didn't blink as she said, what is that? A voicemail that never ended, I said. You'll recognize your voices. He laughed, reflexive and brittle. Illegal recording. I didn't record anything, I replied. My phone did. You called me, you forgot to hang up. It went to voicemail. I saved it. That's not illegal. That's proof. He reached for the phone. I didn't stop him. He listened. First his own voice, smooth as a hallway. Then the other man clipped, bored. Then Melissa. In the living room now. The guests quieted because people know when something off stage has more energy than the show. Even the baby quieted, as if the house itself wanted to hear. He jabbed pause. You're twisting this, he said. Play it again. I answered. He did. He didn't make it to the end. He put the phone down with a carefulness I had seen once before. The day he held a baby bird he found on our lawn asking what to do. He was 8. He listened then. He set it down then too, like anything could crush it. Evan. Melissa started, "Fix this." The oven beeped in the kitchen. A new song started without anyone selecting it. The record player's auto-return had found side B. A trumpet found a lower note. "You wanted an audience," I said. "You'll have one. But not yet." He clenched his jaw. The muscle made a sound. You hear only when you stand close to a man who is losing a script. He rehearsed too long. "I'm not a bad guy," he said. "I didn't call you that," I answered. "I called you my son." He waved the papers like he could fan away the words. "Foreclosure? On me? On my house? Are you trying to humiliate me?" "No," I said, and then I let other sounds do the work. The sleigh bell someone had hung on the back door chimed softly, as the winter air pushed in around a guest. A dog barked once in the distance. Somewhere, a child tore wrapping paper too fast and it ripped like a sail. "This is my home," he finally managed. I looked at the baseboard where a nail popped every hour in winter, like a metronome set in old life. I looked at the crown molding I'd returned to fix when the paint cracked, a job he told me to leave to a contractor. I looked at him. "It was," I said. He took a step closer. His shoe clicked. "You're not evicting me." "I'm not," I said. "You evicted me." I tapped the notice. "The bank will handle the rest, and I'm not the bank." He didn't hear the difference yet. He would. A guest cleared his throat. Another poured wine to make a helpful sound. The world tries to cover. The world hums. But some notes cut through. He asked softer now. "Why?" I could have told him about the night I sat on my shop stool, listening to that never-ending voicemail, and heard him choose a version of me that fit his plans better than my face did. I could have told him about the shovel clanging against the back of my truck when I drove to his place to fix a gutter after it rained the first day of fall, and how he closed the door before I could lift my hand to knock. I could have told him about being told to visit when Melissa's schedule allowed, about shoes on the mall. I said because you made noise, and I heard it, and once you hear something you can't pretend you didn't. He didn't have an answer to that. He was a man built on speeches. He didn't prepare this one. Behind us the oven beeped again. Impatient. In the monitor, the baby sighed. The spoon hit the rim of a mug and chimed a small, faithful note. He found his voice where he always found it, an announcement. "We're going to open presents," he called to the room without turning. "Everyone come in." Dad brought a joke. I didn't move. Melissa called the kids in a voice that always lifted at the end of a sentence, as if she asked permission from the air. He folded the papers and tucked them behind a reindeer figurine like a child hiding a bad report card. He started the music higher. The bass put. He didn't notice the second envelope in my hand. Not yet. He didn't hear the way the stiff edge ticked against my glove. Tiny. Repetitive like a cricket. He didn't see the corner stamped with a county seal. He would hear it later when a clerk in a wooden room read from it, slow and careful into a microphone that made every syllable sound heavier. For now, I let the room fill. You can't rush sound. You can only place it and let it travel. He walked to the tree and lifted the biggest box. "From us," he said, and carried it across the room like a man performing strength for people who don't know how much a box weighs. He set it in front of me. He expected me to smile the way men smile when they don't know where to put their hands. I pressed my palm to the lid. The bow crinkled. He waited for the sound of tearing. "I'll open it later," I said. Someone laughed. It died fast. He dropped into a crouch, right in front of me, and lowered his voice. "What do you want?" "I want the music lower," I said. "Turn it down, hear your daughter breathe. Hear your heater knock. Hear your own words." He stared. Then he stood, walked to the player and did as I asked without realizing what he was doing. The song fell to a human volume. The house took a breath. In the quiet, the foreclosure notice on the mantel crackled and settled like a dry leaf. That was part one. The day sound told the truth. The day I chose when the rest would be eerie. The day I handed him Christmas morning wrapped in paper he couldn't rip apart. And the day a voicemail that never ended finally did. Snow carries a smell people forget. Not just cold, metal, a hint of car exhaust and wet wool. When I stepped back onto his porch, the air bit through my coat and brought all of it up into my nose at once. Cinnamon from the kitchen trailed me outside and then broke apart in the wind. I walked to my truck and opened the door. The cab still smelled like pine sap and old coffee. The thermos on the seat carried last week's roast, burnt edges, a note of chocolate I never tasted, only inhaled. I set the second envelope on the dashboard and let the heater blow across it. Paper has a smell when the ink is fresh. Sharp. A little like new tires. I wanted the scent to sit with me for the drive. 6 months earlier, my shop had smelled like lemon oil and cedar curls. That day I listened to the voicemail that wasn't a voicemail. The fan in the corner pushed warm air through sawdust, and the air turned sweet and dry. I kept the phone face down on the workbench and watched dust settle on it like gray sugar. The glue jar open on my left sent up a sour string that stung the back of my nose. Sweat mixed with it. Men remember with their noses when their heads won't cooperate. I didn't tell anyone right away. I drove to the county building because paper leaves there and paper has its own odor. The lobby hit me with disinfectant and floor polish. The elevator added old steel and electric heat. On the 3rd floor behind a glass window scratched by rings and keys, the clerk slid a stack of forms toward me and the plastic bin she used smelled like a swimming pool. She didn't blink as she said name on the property. Hart, I answered. Caleb, the living trust. Her eyes came up, surprised. She had been in my home the day we poured the slab. Her brother worked the concrete screed. I remembered his cologne in July heat. Peppery, too much. She remembered me by the smell of stain that hung on me that whole summer. You still hold title? She asked. I shook my head before the words arrived. That's what I'm here to confirm. She flipped pages, the paper whispering against paper. She leaned in and said, Recorder's book shows Hart Living Trust. Transfer on death instrument recorded 5 years ago. No deed out. Air moved into my chest slow. The hallway outside reeked of a new carpet they had rolled out last month. I pictured Evan breathing easy when he told someone I signed whatever he put in front of me. I need to file an amendment, I told her, and a certification. She tapped the counter, thinking. We can record today if you have a notary, she said. You'll want a fresh acknowledgement. I know a man, I said, and I did. Pastor Tom kept a notary stamp in his Bible cover. His office smelled like instant coffee and candle wax. The wax never quite left his suit jacket. It rode with him like a quiet passenger. We met that afternoon in the church basement. Soup day. The whole room wore the smell of carrots, chicken and dill. Volunteers wiped tables with bleach water, and the tang bit deep. Pastor Tom pressed his palm to my shoulder, and I caught peppermint from the mints he kept for kids who sat still during sermons. He lowered his voice. You okay? I'm working on it. He spread the forms. The paper warmed under my hands and let up that tire rubber odor of new ink. He checked IDs, lifted the stamp and the ink pad sighed when he set it down. He slammed his hand on the desk to seat the seal and the scent puffed up like a tiny storm. Alcohol dye, a ghost of something chemical that always makes me think of hospital corridors. My late wife used to wrinkle her nose at it. She'd tease that I came home smelling like a file cabinet. Amendment to the Hart Living Trust, Pastor Tom read. Trustee succession named. Property description attached. Keep reading. Certification of trust, he continued. And Caleb, what's this? A revocation of a durable power of attorney that no one knows exists, I told him. It was signed in a doctor's office when I broke my wrist 10 years ago. I never used it. But I don't leave open doors, he nodded. The coffee maker burped behind us, sending steam laced with stale grounds. He slid his stamp across one more page. He looked up through the vapor. You sure you want to go the long way? The long way holds, I said. Quick breaks, slow lasts. After we recorded the papers, I drove to a diner at the edge of town. The place wears its kirkin out front. Grease, griddle, onions. All of it sits in the air like a coat you shrug into whether you like it or not. I like it. It tells the truth, what's hot, what's ready, what's burned. I took a corner booth and ordered coffee. I didn't plan drink. I waited. She arrived with the smell of rain before rain. Her umbrella shook outside and threw a cold mist in. When she stepped through the door, Delia Brooks. She chaired a small community fund my wife helped start. She used to bring casseroles to our house when her son was small. Her perfume was always the same, jasmine, barely there. When she slid into the booth, the diner air shifted around it and made the flowers float. She whispered, You didn't call me back. I wanted to meet where the food is louder than ears, I told her. She slid a folder across the table. The man at the grill scraped metal on metal. Bacon flared and spit. A busboy's rag spread lemon cleaner under the napkin dispensers and the smell fought with the onions until both gave in. Delia tapped the folder and said, He came to me months ago. He said you were stepping back. He said you authorized the refinance and asked our fund to provide a limited guarantee. Did you sign? She didn't blink as she said, I did, with conditions. I knew you wouldn't ask for help without calling me first. The paper smelled wrong. I smiled because I knew what she meant. Some loans carry fresh paint and fresh carpet. This one carried cheap cologne and hurry. What conditions? I asked. She turned a page. Claire's 14b. If the borrower displaces the prior owner without a written lease or lawful eviction, the guarantor may accelerate and assume the position of the lender. We step in. We name the trustee, we select the sale date. We also notify any title company of a competing claim. Grease popped behind us. I could taste it in the air more than I could smell it now. You wrote that? Your wife wrote the skeleton years ago, she said. We used it to protect older homeowners in church. I kept it in my drawer. Evan didn't read beyond the bold print. I let my hand rest on the folder. It felt warm from the kitchen heat. Thank you, I said. She leaned in and said, he's not evil, Caleb. He's hungry. Hungry men ignore scents that warn other men off. I taught him to smell sawdust and know the difference between oak and pine, I answered. Maybe I forgot to teach him the smell of shame. She pushed a smaller envelope across. This is your copy of the guarantee addendum, she said. And this, another paper slid loose, smelling like toner, is our notice of election to cure and accelerate held not mailed. I lowered my voice. Held? We can trigger it, she said. If he forces you out. I looked past her to the flat top where a cook wiped away butter with a scrape that squealed. The whole place smelled like a decision served hot. Delia sipped her tea. Mint rose up and cut through everything. I'm your ally, she said. Don't argue. I won't, I answered. She reached into her coat and pulled a small bottle. Hand sanitizer. The sharp alcohol smell jumped into my sinuses and made my eyes water. She rubbed her palms. I don't touch other people's mess without this anymore, she said. Keep your hands clean. Let paper do the dirty work. I carried the folder home in the passenger seat. The truck picked up the smell and held it with the pine and coffee like all of it belonged together. In my shop, I set the folder next to the jar of finish that always smelled like oranges gone wrong. I labeled a new box with a thick marker and the ink stung the air. Backstory likes to hide in old odors. The first week after Evan was born, our house smelled like boiled bottles and warm milk. I used to hold him under my chin after midnight and breathe through his hair. The powder, the sleep, the promise. Years later, football pads lived in our laundry room and the whole place carried sweat and grass. I learned the seasons by what we washed out of his clothes. That's what makes a father soft and blind. A man will ignore a gas leak if he's sure the smell means his boy is home. The first time Melissa came over, she wore expensive shampoo that filled the entryway. It stuck to the couch for days. My wife wrinkled her nose and aired the house out anyway. She had a good nose for storms. Mine took longer. I met another ally by accident. He sold me varnish. Ace Hardware, aisle 14. The store smelled like rubber hoses and fertilizer. The kid at the paint counter wore a name tag that said Aaron, and a hoodie that smelled like stale weed and dryer sheets. Behind him, a man I knew by reputation more than sight lifted a sample board and sniffed it like a chef. Taste sauce. Harold, name. He ran the local title office. He caught me looking and laughed. He leaned close and said, Varnish tells on a man. Put too much on, and your house smells like you're hiding something. You're Harold, I said. He nodded. You're Caleb. We recorded your trust instrument 5 years back. Lemon oil on the paperwork. We had to air out the bin. I raised an eyebrow. You remember that? I remember smells, he said simply. And I remember men who build their own houses. He glanced at my cart, then at my eyes. You hear about your son? I didn't answer fast. He read my silence the way men in small towns learn to read their weather. He tapped the edge of a paint chip and said, If a packet shows up with your name spelled in a way I've never seen you spell it, I call you. Off the record. Public documents only. I appreciate that, I told him. He reached under the counter and bagged my varnish. The plastic carried the faint chemical smell that clings to new bags. A factory ghost. He set it down and added, You didn't hear it from me, but someone tried to file a preliminary change of ownership form last month. Missing a signature that matters. My signature, I said. He smiled. Paper remembers. I walked out into a gust that carried the smell of cut grass from the nursery 2 doors down. I stood in it and let the clipping's sweet green sting clear my head. Men forget what clean smells like when they live too long around broken promises. I spent years teaching wood to behave. I forgot people don't bend for long. At night, the shop held heat and the orange vinegar smell of stripping agent. I worked slower. I sanded chair rungs that didn't need sanding. I boiled coffee. I didn't drink. I wrote dates on envelopes. I tested pens. Ink and sweat together make a smell like old coins. It stuck to my fingers, and I let it. I wanted every piece of this to have a place I could locate later by scent alone. One afternoon, I walked the perimeter of the house Evan lived in now because I had built that fence too. The creosote on the posts had weathered into a tar smell that rose when the sun hit it. Melissa's garden carried tomato vines, and bays through the open kitchen window wafted garlic, lemon zest shaved too hard, and the butter they used too much of. The smells made a proud parade. Pride often smells like citrus in houses like that. A neighbor pushed a trash bin up the driveway. He was new. He smelled like gin soap and detergent. He looked at me like a man looks at a dog. He doesn't know. Can I help you? I used to help myself here. I said, just checking the gate. He shrugged. Smells good in there, he said. Better than my place. Smell doesn't tell you everything, I told him. He laughed and went inside. His door clicked. Fabric softer trailed him like fog. The day I tested the last piece of the plan, I met Deli again in a place that always smells like endings. The courthouse. Old books. Toner. A kind of dust that tastes bitter when it lands on your tongue. We stood by a bulletin board where notices go to die. She held a manila envelope. I caught the paper powder in the air when she opened it. Fine as flour, it carries the smell of cabinets no one opens until someone has to. She whispered, if he puts you out, we pull the pin. We appoint a trustee, not his. Harold? I asked. Harold, she said. And Lydia upstairs. I reveal. Twice in one hallway. I didn't deserve it. I took it anyway. My wife had built the kind of life that leaves perfumes on other people's coats years later. I walked through those perfumes and remembered her hands. Flour and soap. Varnish once. She used to untangle my hair after long days and say the house smelled like a tree in rain. I carried that with me into winter. On Christmas, the cinnamon and butter tried to drown it out. Cinnamon lies. Cedar doesn't. Back in my truck, I cracked the window and let cold crawl in and bite the sharp out of the dashboard. A neighbor lit a fire and the smoke came thin and sweet. It threaded into the cab and wrapped a second envelope in campfire memory. I tapped the steering wheel. My hand still held the smell of my son's house. Citrus. Candle. A trace of the cologne he always overused when he entertained. Blue bottle. Cool metal cap, the kind that says ocean on the label and lies. He texted then. I saw the bubble, then the words. You went too far. I lowered my voice to the empty cab. You did, I said to no one but the burning pine. I didn't answer him. I drove to the credit union and parked beneath the holly bushes they decorate every year with plastic berries that smell like nothing. Inside, the lobby carried winter coats and paper and that faint, sweet smell of candy from a bowl on the counter. Maya, the assistant manager, wore a sweater that picked up every odor in the building: paper, toner, peppermint oil. She waved me past the rope. She whispered, Ms. Brooks is in her office. Delia stood when I walked in. Tears again. Mint again. You sure? She asked. Yes. She set an envelope on her desk blotter. The leather had the agreeable animal smell I always trust. She pointed. Notice of trustee substitution. Undated. Hold it, I told her. We will, she said, until he does what he bragged about. Thank you, I said again, and the words tasted like metal. Gratitude and anger share a flavor sometimes. On the way out, I passed a woman hugging her boy. He must have been 4. He smelled like graham crackers and crayons. He pressed his face into her scarf and made a sound newborns make when they settle. I wanted to stop and go back 25 years and stand in my own kitchen and inhale that smell again, and not let it go until it warned me of everything coming at once. I didn't. I walked into the wind. It smelled like new snow trying to get born. 2 days later, Harold called. His office always smells like ink and cardboard. He never hides it. Package showed up, he said. Your name spelled wrong. Just like I predicted. A deed without a deed. I sent it back. He slammed his hand on the desk. I could hear the hollow wood through the phone. You keep your copies dry, he told me. Wet paper tears and hands that panic. I said, I'm dry. He chuckled. I bet you are. By the time leaves burned in the fall, my shop held a new scent. Calm. It smells like nothing at all. You only notice it if you've been away. I lined up the envelopes. I closed the glue. I aired the place out until only wood and clean air remained. And then I waited. I waited until cinnamon tried to dress up a lie and butter tried to sweeten it. I waited for the sound of a spoon against glass, and the smell of coffee poured for the show. I waited for my son to perform the part of a man who has already decided his father is a story he can edit. He made his move. He put me out. The hall smelled like his aftershave and my boot soles on winter mud. I walked away carrying the smell of his home on my coat like a badge I didn't want. That's when I lit the fuse Delia had tucked in her folder. Not in fire. In paper. Paper that carries new ink, tire rubber, dust, lemon oil from my shop, when I stacked it, and a pinch of mint from her tea when she sealed it. The scent of the long way. Willie revealed, allies plural. A pastor with peppermint on his breath. A clerk who remembers stains by smell. A title man who can nose out a forgery. And Delia, who kept jasmine small and steady against a tide of butter. Men think victory smells like gunpowder. It doesn't. It smells like a room with the windows cracked in winter, and a stack of documents breathing cool on a table. Memorable line or not, I'll say it plain. You can fake a signature, but you can't fake a record number. And quiet as it's kept. This too. Money tries to smell like flowers. It never does, not for long. I turned the key, the truck coughed, then settled. Heat rolled, paper warmed, pine, coffee, mint, smoke. I breathed once and let it sting a little so I'd remember the order of things. Part 2 wasn't about noise, it was about air, what it carries, who it brings close. It brought allies out of corners I thought were empty. And it carried me to the next room where light, not smell, tells the truth. Light found me first. A slow sheet across the shop floor, silver on sawdust, thin as breath on glass. I stepped into it and watched dust brighten, edges sharpen, lines return to their proper places. Night hides what a man avoids. Morning gives it back. I rolled the second envelope in my hands until it reflected the window. Paper gleams when it knows it will be seen. Today was about that light, not noise. Winter light that doesn't warm. Office light that exposes. Candle light that remembers. Fluorescent light that refuses to flatter anyone. I wanted all of it. By 9 the sun had climbed just high enough to bounce off old snow and throw a white glare into the title office lobby. The glass door made a rectangle of brightness on the carpet, and I stood inside it until Harold waved me through. His desk lamp ran hot and clean. No shade, no softness. He liked the way fresh ink looked under it. He didn't blink as he said, "We're set." "Say it in the clear," I told him. He leaned in and said, "Substitution of trustee prepared. Notice of default in election to sell prepared. Certification of trust attached. Recorder's intake form filled." He tipped the lamp toward the stack and each page flashed once. "We carry them to the counter. They scan, they live." I lowered my voice. "And the guarantor's election." He slid a pale blue page forward. The watermark caught the lamp like a fish scale. "Executed by the community fund," he said. "Delia signed. Notarized yesterday. You can see the seal when you tilt it." I tilted it. The round emboss rose and fell with the light like a map. Ink dries fast under bulbs like his. It looked ready for the sun. We walked to the recorder. The hallway fixtures were the old kind. Long humming sticks that turned people slow. I didn't care how we looked. I cared that the pages looked like they belonged to Day. At the counter, the clerk pulled a scanner arm down, and a bar of white slid across the first page. The red recorded band printed itself along the margin, and shone wet for a second before turning matte. She whispered, "Instrument number 2024-118327. I shook my head, surprised by how calm I felt. "Read it again." "Instrument number 2024-118327, she repeated, louder, so the number hung in the glare. Harold tapped the edge of the page. "Substitution of trustee," he said for the record. "Trustee Lydia Voss. Address on file." The lamp above the station caught the raised notary seal, and threw a ringed shadow like a sundial. Proof inside proof. The second page moved under the light. "Notice of default in election to sell," the clerk read. "Borrower Evan Hart. Beneficiary Brooks Community Fund. Per recorded guarantee. Trustee Voss." She turned it, and the scanner's white bars slid again left to right, then back like a lighthouse. The date printed in crisp black. The time stamped itself. 09:47:13 seconds pushed forward by circuitry, with no loyalty to anyone's story. "Next," she said. Harold produced the certification of trust. "Attached legal description," he noted. The tiny letters of metes and bounds looked like fine stitches. Under the lamp they were legible where they would be unreadable in a kitchen at night. I signed with a pen that glinted. The ink caught and settled. Pastor Tom's notary acknowledgement stood on the page like a coin held up to sun. He had written the record number from the trust amendment in neat block letters. Numbers don't squint. She slid a receipt across. White as porcelain. Certified copies will be ready in an hour, she said. Microfilm by end of week. Make one copy now, Harold asked. He'll need it under glass. She didn't argue. She walked to a side machine that threw a steady Arctic light. The copies came out warm, then cooled, and the toner sheen disappeared into ordinary gray. The original, though, kept a slight shine. Originals do that under noon bulbs. Outside, the sun ricocheted off the courthouse facade and made me narrow my eyes. I had built roofs to manage glare. My son had built rooms to capture it. The square's Christmas tree threw green-blue shadows on the sidewalk, and a string of lights blinked a stubborn pattern that didn't match any song. Light likes its own rhythm. Delia met us on the steps, a white folder under her arm. The board voted to accelerate, she said. We signed the election with the number you just got. She turned the folder until I could see the lines. Somewhere behind me a camera flashed. Tourists. Not about us. And the tiny explosion threw us forward in miniature on the courthouse glass. 3 figures, bright at the edges. I said nothing. I watched her pen catch the sun when she clicked it open. I watched the blue ink lay a path. Harold placed a small metal ruler on the signature line to keep the light from blinding her. Even that glinted. Instrument number 2024-118327, she said as she wrote it. Tell him this when you deliver. We're delivering, I asked. She held up a second set in yellow. Service of notice, she said. We could mail. We won't. Paper belongs in the light. We do it in person. We carried the stack to Lydia's office on the 4th floor of a building with windows too big for its age. Her blinds were open, slats straight, files were out on the table, each tab turned outward to the window as if paper wanted to see the sky. Lydia wore glasses that caught the window and made her eyes look like a pair of small moons. She didn't blink as she said, I'll be trustee of record by lunch. Harold nodded. You already are. He pointed at the receipt. Right there. She read quickly, lips barely moving, and the light cut through her glasses and made brief white lines on her cheeks. We'll serve the substitution and the notice of default, she decided. We'll append the certification of trust in the election. We'll attach recorder receipts, no surprises, just noon light, and the truth a person can read without squinting. Do you need a process server? I asked. She tilted her head. I like to do first service myself. She opened a drawer. A body camera sat inside, a black square with a lens like an unblinking eye. The red standby LED made a pinprick on the folder. That way, when they say the room was dark, I play it back and watch the sun prove them wrong. We drove separately. Her sedan wore daylight like it belonged to it. I followed and let the miles smear the cold into a thin shine on the hood. At my son's street, snowbanks glared back. The porch light was off because the sky did the work for it. Melissa's wreath glittered with mica. Fake frost reflects as faithfully as real ice, if you put it in the right place. Lydia stepped up first. She pressed the doorbell and the small camera above it threw a ring of white that washed her face flat for a second. She smiled at the lens like a teacher about to start class. Evan opened the door halfway. Sunshine fell into the foyer and crawled over his polished floor toward the staircase. He squinted, annoyed at the intrusion. Not because it was bright, but because it was uncontrollable. He slammed his hand on the doorframe. Who are you? Lydia kept her voice even. Trustee of record, she said. Lydia Vuss, here to serve a substitution of trustee and a notice of default, and election to sell under deed of trust. She lifted the top page with 2 fingers, so the title line caught the day front on. Light erased every shadow. You'll want to read this where you can see it. He laughed without humor. We have a lawyer. I have a lens, she answered, touching the square on her lapel. The small red dot glowed. And the sun. He looked past her and found me on the walk. You did this, he said. Not loud. He was learning that volume doesn't help when daylight is the opponent. I didn't move. You did the borrowing, I said. We're doing the recording. He tried to take the papers, then thought better of it and stepped back as if that would make them vanish. Lydia set the stack gently in the strip of light falling across the entry table. Service complete, she said for the camera. She added a slim, clear sleeve, recorder receipt. The plastic shone and inside it white slips glowed like bones on an X-ray. Melissa appeared at the top of the stairs, one hand on the rail. She shaded her eyes against the glare as if the house suddenly pointed east. She whispered, What is happening? Evan didn't answer. He stared at the words on top. The capital letters did what capitals do in daylight. They refused to be confused with anything else. Notice of default. Beneath that, the specific things, the date of the missed payment, the election by the fund to sell under the deed of trust, the trustee's name in letters big enough for a neighbor to read from the porch. He hated that last part more than the rest. The size of the font. Pride monitors the sizes of things. Lydia stepped back onto the porch. "We'll post the notice physically as well," she said. She looked at the siding at eye level, found a clear strip and taped a duplicate in a sleeve. The tape flashed when it caught the sun. It would flash at sunset too. People forget how persistent a square of clear plastic can be when the light moves past it each day. He spoke at last with a voice he had trained for boardrooms lit like morning. "This is harassment." I lifted the receipts. "This is a record," I replied. "Instrument number 202327. Read it anywhere. The number doesn't change in different rooms." He tried to pull the sleeve away. Lydia's palm hovered above the page without touching. "You can keep that copy," she said. "The one posted is for the world." A car rolled by. Its windshield flashed and sent a sun blade across his foyer. He flinched. People who design their lives with dimmers forget that the day doesn't ask permission to enter. He closed the door until the latch clicked and stood just inside with the paper spilling light back at his face. Lydia turned the body camera off. The tiny eye went dark, but my eyes didn't. The sky held steady. She didn't blink as she said, "First drop, substitution. Second, default. Third, waits until sale is set. Triple drop only works if each comes in its own sun." "We'll wait," I told her. My voice sounded like a wall painted with eggshell. No shine, no drama, just there. On the drive back, the world was full of glass. Church windows with nativity scenes. Storefronts with CL banners and letters that threw shadows on themselves. Cars pulled into lots and held the day in their windshields. My truck's rear view cut a thin strip of white across my knuckles. Even the river on the edge of town wore a skin of light like a language none of us speak but all of us recognize. I stopped at Pastor Tom's. His office window faced west, and afternoon had started to build in it. He pointed me to the same chair. His stamp sat on the desk where the last rays could strike it, and the metal ring around the handle made a bright circle on the wood. He lowered his voice. "You served. It's done." He opened a drawer and lifted out a small envelope. "You left this," he said. Inside was the revocation of that old power of attorney. The seal shook. The judge's lobby had stamped the date on it yesterday in purple ink that looked almost black under weak light and bright royal under a desk lamp. "Take it to his office, don't mail it. Put it in his hand. While the sun is a witness," he said with a little smile that showed he knew how that sounded and liked it anyway. I carried it across town. His firm's building wore glass like armor. The lobby atrium held a tree whose lights were still on against the day, and the small bulbs fought not to get washed out. A receptionist sat in a pool of glow from a desk lamp shaped like a sphere. She tried to lift her chin as if her jaw were another light source. She whispered, "May I help you?" "I'm here to serve a revocation," I said. "Personal delivery." She glanced at the envelope and at my face, saw that I wasn't there for theater, and made a call. The elevator doors behind me opened and threw soft interior light onto the marble. He came down fast, wanting to control the angle of this moment. He picked the spot where he thought the shadows would help. He misjudged the height of the glass. The winter sun dropped a solid bar across the lobby and set a stripe straight across his chest like a sash. He shook his head, as if he could dislodge the line. "You want a scene?" he accused. "I want light," I said. I held the envelope until the paper warmed, then handed it over. He tore the end in one motion and the flap lifted and flashed. He scanned the title, "Revocation of Power of Attorney." Beneath it, my name, a notary block, a filed stamp, case reference numbers for the old instrument, the new trust amendment, and the county index book. He looked up. He slammed his hand on the envelope once, then steadied. "This was nothing," he said. "A doctor's form. Forms turn into rooms if you don't watch them." I answered, "Sun closes rooms." He waved to the receptionist without looking. "We're done," he told her. But he was telling the building, the tree, the burn of sunlight on the floor. He wanted the scene to end. Light doesn't end on command. It only slides. I stepped back so the stripe on his chest widened and he could feel it. He flinched again. He always had good eyes. He just didn't like what they were for. Outside, I phoned Lydia from the sidewalk where the glare off the cars made me blink. "Serve the revocation," I said. "Good," she said. "Certified mail to his counsel anyway. Belt and suspenders." Also, Harold filed a notice of pendency for you. Title won't move without stepping into the day and waving around. Lares pendens, I repeated, tasting the Latin like a coin on the tongue. Case number? 24 CV 3118, she answered. Judge Kramer. It's on the docket screen in the courthouse hall. Big television. Bright as new. I pictured that hallway and the way the flat panel floods faces with a light that lies about nothing. Names shine the same for mayors and men like me. That's the last honest thing about courthouses. By 3, cloud cover softened the town. The light went pale like paper before text. I drove the house I no longer slept in and parked across the street where I could see the posted notice. It sat in its sleeve on the siding. A picture frame hung too low, and it threw a little rectangle of brightness onto the snow. A delivery truck stopped next door, and even in the flat light the posted page caught and echoed more than everything around it. The neighbors didn't need to ask what it was. They knew. He opened the front door and looked toward me, as if I had put the sky where it was. He raised a hand, not to wave but to shield his eyes, and then let it fall. He carried the copies inside and disappeared. I didn't follow. Service doesn't require conversation. It requires daylight and a clock. At home I sat by a window and let the late sun climb the opposite wall. It turned the picture of my wife gold, then white, then ordinary, then dim. I watched that progress the way men watch gauges. All day is a gauge. So are holidays. If you have the right eyes you can see safety and danger by the way light settles on a table. She used to say that windows remember better than people, because they keep nothing but what passes through. I put the certified copy on the sill, and let the last of the sun lay across the record number. 2024-11-8327. It looked right. Numbers look strongest when the room stops trying to be dramatic. Memorable lines aren't my trade, but a thought landed and stayed. Paper is quiet until you hold it under the right light. Then it speaks in numbers. And this. Ink hides in shade, records live in day. I slept early, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to wake into the kind of light that shows whether a plan is working. Morning does that. It shows you what stayed, and what ran. At dawn, the notice on his siding would shine again for anyone who walked a dog. At noon, it would glow for the mail carrier. At dusk it would pick up the last of the West and hold it a beat longer than the clapboard around it. That's how you teach a man who likes dimmers. You put his choices where the sun can keep reading them out loud. The legal paper drop was done. He was served by day and recorded by lamps and screens he couldn't unplug. Step 3 didn't cheer me. It settled me. A man doesn't need applause when the room is bright enough to read without a lamp. Tomorrow's work belonged to touch, the locks, the accounts, the metal and plastic of a life you can hold or lose. But tonight I let the number cool on the sill until it was just black on white in a room with no performance left in it. Day finished its work. Night took over. Morning waited with both hands on the window frame. Morning waited with both hands on the window frame. I ran my fingers along the wood and felt the dents my wife left with her wedding ring when she tapped time to the radio once years back. The paint felt cool. Winter smooths edges. It doesn't forgive them. I pressed my palm flat to the glass. Cold climbed into my skin until the ache felt honest. Today belonged to touch. Keys. Plastic. Paper with weight. The second envelope lay on the table where the sunlight would find it later. I slid a thumb under the flap edge and felt the tiny burr from the cutter. Good stock. Crisp. I slipped it into my coat. Then reached for the tin that held spare keys. Brass. Knocked brass. I chose 3 blanks and set them aside for later. Metal has a temperature even when a room doesn't. At the credit union, the lobby carpet pushed back against my boots like a firm handshake. Maya waved me past the rope. Her mouse clicked, and I felt the vibration carry through the counter into my fingertips where they rested. Old buildings give you that slight tremors, the way a station platform hums before the train arrives. She didn't blink as she said, "Miss Brooks is ready." Delia met me in an office with leather chairs that sighed when they took you. The blotter had a subtle ridge where someone always signs, a low hill that a pen has climbed thousands of times. Delia slid a keyboard toward her, and the keys offered that rubbery give that tells a man you're entering numbers you won't want to forget. "We exercised our guarantor's rights yesterday," she said. "Today we implement touch points." "Touch points," I repeated, running a finger over the edge of the desk. It was beveled, smooth. No splinters, no surprises. She tapped the screen and kept her voice even. First, set off and hold. When a borrower defaults on an obligation to the institution, Deposit accounts can be held in the amount of the default. It's in the account agreement, he clicked without reading. We don't take, we hold. I nodded. Make the hold. She pressed enter with her index finger, nail clicking once. Done. She looked up at me and added, he'll feel it when he tries to swipe. Second? I asked. Debit card status. She said. Flagged. ATM withdrawals decline. If he tries at one of ours, the machine will retain the card. At network machines, it will decline with callback. She turned the screen so I could see the field change from active to hold. The key made a soft plastic snap when it settled back up. Jump rope for fingers. Third, she went on. The line of credit tied to the refinance. Frozen. He can't draw against it. The button is here. She hovered the pointer, then clicked. My phone vibrated in my pocket at the same moment. Lydia's text. Short. Leon posted. Lydia pendants. Indexed. Phones have their own feel. The small rumble you can't pretend you didn't feel. Delia reached into a file tray. Fourth. We stand up a lockbox. He can lie by certified funds delivered to trustee. No online. No ACH. Lydia will give you the address. She handed me a page on thick paper. The watermark scratched under my nail when I tested it. I lowered my voice. Insurance. Already touched. She said, smiling at the word. Mortgage clause updated. Loss Pay Brooks Community Fund and Voss Trustee. The agent printed a new Dekiva page. Feel this. She gave me the declaration. The embossed seal rose under my thumb like a coin. He'll learn he can't file claims without our name on the check. We signed acknowledgments. Pens scratched. The pressure left grooves you could follow blind. On my way out, I stopped at the small trash can by the teller window, where they keep the scissors for customers who need to cut up cards. I pulled a plastic rectangle from my wallet. Years ago, I had added Evan as an authorized user on a shop card when his car died, and he needed to get to interviews. I never took him off. The plastic had a nick on the corner where it had scraped a counter in 2011. I pressed the card into the scissors until the blades flexed, then closed my hand. The cut made a dry, decisive sound. I turned the halves in my fingers. The chip cross-section looked like a sliced seed. I dropped both pieces into the can. Should have done that sooner, Maya said, not unkind. Some things you need to feel to finish, I said. I rekeyed my shop at noon. The old Schlage cylinder gave an inch under the wrench, then let go with a delicate pop you feel in your wrist. I pressed the new key in, and the pins set with tiny stairs of contact. Steel talking to brass. Clean. No. I pocketed the old key and it felt wrong immediately. Light, loose, pointless. I put it in the coffee can marked keys, and heard it chime against the others, the sound of past doors. Then I ran my hand over the shop door. The grain rose, rough against the pads of my fingers. I had planed this board in the summer. Winter waked the lines up. By one touch found him. The gas station on Maple has pumps with keypads that stick in cold weather. The display glass fogs from breath. He texted first. Card issue. Fix this. I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, a photo came through. The receipt. Declined. Call bank. The heat from the printer had wrinkled the thermal paper and his thumb pressed the corner flat so I could see it. I could almost feel the cheek paper between my fingers through the image. He called. I let it ring 4 beats and picked up. He leaned in and said, "Cute." I shook my head even though he couldn't see it. Bank policy. He laughed through his nose. You need me to feel poor? I need you to feel default. I said, it isn't a story, it's a lever. It touches things. He slammed his hand on something hard. The pump? The car roof? The sound came through my phone, as a slap that made my index finger tense. Turn it back on, he said. No, I answered. He went quiet. He knew the shape of that word from childhood. Then he tried for lawyer tone again. There are laws. There are agreements, I said. Your thumb pressed I agree years ago. That button had texture you never noticed. He hung up. The line clicked. I put the phone down and rubbed my palm on my jeans, wiping off a contact that wasn't there. At 2, a teller sent Delia a note, and Delia forwarded it to me. ATM retained guard at the South Branch. The receipt had a notch where the teeth grabbed bills. Today they grabbed plastic. The teller wrote, borrower demanded return. Machine had. I pictured the way the machine's rubber rollers pinch and pull. I remembered installing a mail slot once. The way metal takes what it's meant to take and refuses to give it back without tools. He could file a dispute. He could tug. The machine would keep it. The message on the screen, "Please contact your financial institution," would glow blue on his skin. He drove to my shop. I heard his palm thud the door before I saw him. 2 quick knocks. Then his grip on the handle. He twisted. The knob turned smooth, stopped, and told him no with a click. He felt all the way to his elbow. He rattled it. Metal answered. I opened. He shoved past the threshold and stopped because his shoulder hit my hand. I didn't push. I just laid my palm there, steady. Warm skin on cold coat. He felt the boundary. He whispered, "What game is this?" "It isn't a game," I said. "It's maintenance." He pointed at the small pile of key shavings on the mat. "You changed it. Keys are for people who live here," I said. He scanned the room. He needed something to touch to make his point. He grabbed a chair back. "Maple." I watched his hand find the contour I had carved for a palm his size when he was 13. His fingers fit. He let go like the wood had burned him. He slammed his hand on the workbench. "You froze my accounts." "Delia placed a hold," I said. "Set off. Cross-collateralization. Words you can feel now." He took a step, then another, as if the floor had changed under him. He tapped his chest with 2 fingers. "I am not a criminal." "I didn't call you that," I answered. "You're a borrower in default." He didn't like the feel of that label. "It has corners." He lowered his voice. "Melissa went to the market. Her card didn't work. She had to put food back." "Did she put the wine back first?" I asked. I looked at his hands. His knuckles were red from the cold, the skin across them shiny and tight. "Tonight you can tell her to take cash," I said. "Certified funds only for the house." He blinked slow, then he spotted the cut plastic halves poking above the lip of my trash can. He reached in before I could stop him and picked them up. He turned them over. He didn't blink as he said, "You cut me off that card." "I added you when you were starting out," I said. "I forgot to remove you. You kept it to control me. I kept it because I forgot to see you as a man who would use it on me." He dropped the halves and they clinked against the rim. "Plastic shouldn't make that sound. Broken things sometimes do." He looked around again, searching for something steadier than his voice. His palms slid over the edge of the workbench, until he found a gouge I had never sanded out. He pressed his thumb into it like a man pressing a bruise to check if it's real. "I will sue you," he said. I picked up a screwdriver. The handle's ridges fit between my fingers just so. "You can try," I said. "You'll put your hand on a Bible. It will feel like leather. You'll lift your right arm. It will feel heavy." He opened his mouth, then closed it. He touched the doorknob again as he left and the metal gave him the same answer it gave him when he came in. People learn by repeated contact. Sometimes that's the only way. By 3:30 Harold texted a photo from his desk. "Title company demand letter received stamp, purple, raised just enough to catch a finger." He wrote, "They tried to order a payoff. We replied account in default. Trustee's instruction required." Felt good. Maya called an hour later. She whispered because teller stations ask for whispers. "He came in," she said. "He wanted cash." The hold applied. He pounded the counter. We didn't move. The glass flexed. "Is he okay?" I asked. "He left with his hands wide open," she said, like he didn't know what to hold. I thanked her. Her voice softened. "You smell like sawdust every time you come in," she said. "Today your coat left grit on the chair arms. We'll vacuum." "Don't apologize." "I won't," I said, and we both smiled at how human that felt. I drove to the insurance agent before they closed. The bell over the door hit my shoulder when I pushed in too hard. The agent slid a new declarations page across his desk. The paper had those micro ridges you can only feel if you drag your nails slow. He tapped the mortgage clause with a pen. The pen knocked twice. "Loss payable to Brooks Community Fund and Voss trustee," he read. "County recorders love this line." I slid the page back into its envelope. The glue on the flap had a grain to it. When I pressed it, it gave then held. "Thank you," I said. He leaned in and said, "He won't like the feel of the checks if there's a claim." He maimed splitting a check in 2 halves and sliding one to each side. 2 signatures. 4 hands. 1 roof. At dusk, the house on his street wore lights that someone had set to blinking too fast. The plastic sleeve on the notice still caught the last color of the sky and tossed it back. I parked where my tires rolled over old gravel. It vibrated through the steering wheel and into my fingers, a ridiculous comfort. Road tells the truth in texture. A delivery guy trudged past, Package balanced on his palm. He pressed the bell with his knuckle. Melissa opened. I could see her hand wrap the edge of the door tight, and then loosen when she saw cardboard. She signed with a stylus that dragged, the way those styluses always drag. A fake pen on glass pretending to be ink on paper. She struggled to make the E in her name curve. The doodle looked like a heart that didn't quite close. Inside, through the window, I saw my granddaughter reach for the box. Her fingers spread. She is still honest about wanting touch to tell her what's inside. I went home and gathered what I could control. I pulled the old metal cash box from the top shelf and turned the dial. The numbers rolled under my fingertips like old marbles. It opened. Inside lay the note my wife wrote when the shop first opened. Pay cash when you can. Pay kindness when you can't. The ink had faded, but the paper still bit when I pinched it. I put it back. Then I found the donation envelope with the shelter's address. The paper in it had weight. I thumbed it, then set it aside for later. At 7, he texted again. We can fix this. Sit down with me in the bank. I lowered my voice and sent a single line. Certified funds. Trusty lockbox. I added Lydia's address. No adjectives, just the way to touch the cure. 10 minutes later. Cash? You're joking. I didn't answer. I pictured him at his kitchen island, fingers drumming on quartz. Quartz has a coolness that pretends it will last forever. Heat hands can't warm it long. He would hate that tonight. Cold counter, warm cheeks. At 9, the door to my shop opened and shut by habit before my brain caught up. I had given Pastor Tom a key last year when he insisted my finish rags shouldn't live in a closed bin. He came in, shook chilled fingers and blew into his hands. He didn't blink as he said, "You look like a man who needs to hold something good." He set a box on the bench. Inside lay a quilt the women's group had stitched for the shelter, the fabric squares rubbed under my palm like small complicated promises. He put my hand on a corner. We get to choose what we touch when we're angry, he said. Wood, paper, people. I folded it back. Thank you. Not yet. Later, he said, patting my shoulder. The pat landed heavy, then lifted light. After he left, I picked up a lock set I had bought earlier and popped it open. The parts came out one by one. Latch, strike plate, deadbolt, screws in a tiny bag that rasped when I tore it. I set them on the bench in a neat line. Order you can see and touch. I imagined Lydia laying out her files the same way. I imagined Leah pressing enter. I imagined Maya's finger hovering over the override key and not pressing it because you don't help a man by giving him back a key to a thing he's already broken. Around midnight, my phone lit the inside of the shop with that bluer-than-real glow. A photo. A restaurant check. The table grain showed under it. Fake wood, too smooth. I zoomed in with my finger and felt the glass warm as it responded. The total scratched in pen. Under it. Card declined. A hand shadow crossed the bottom corner. He'd tried to cover the word and failed. The pen stroke at the T of had dug deep enough to leave a ridge. The camera didn't see, but my finger imagined. He wrote, "Are you done?" I typed, "Not with you. With this." He answered nothing. Maybe the word hit and stayed. Maybe his battery died. Either way, quiet has a feel too. It's not empty. It's dense. You can put your palm against it and know it will hold. I reached for the second envelope and ran my thumb along its edge again. Smooth. Ready. I set it next to my keys and felt the small differences in their cuts. 3 ridges. 4. One high tooth that would snag if you didn't angle it right. Tomorrow would take the last thing he trusted. His voice in a room he designed. He liked microphones. He liked crowds to hold heat while his words made shapes in the air and pressed against other people's shoulders. I would hand him paper again. But this time, I would put him in a space where touch belongs to everyone at once. A courthouse pew. A lectern edge. Worn down by years. A microphone he didn't control. Financial lockout had done its work. Metal, plastic, and paper had said no. The skin of his world had learned a new texture. Next came a different contact. A palm flat on a Bible. A mouth near a mic. Words that would not sit still once they touched air. I turned off the shop light. The switch clicked. The dark wrapped my hands and reminded them they weren't done. In the morning, I'd feel the wood of a door I hadn't opened in years. I'd feel the elevator button give. I'd feel the smooth rail of the courtroom aisle. I'd feel the tremble in my own fingers when I set the last envelope down where light and crowd and law could touch it all at once. And he would feel it too. Crowds have a weight. Not just bodies, breath, coats, voices stacked. The courthouse lobby held all of it. Marble reflected footsteps. Fluorescent light hummed in flattened faces. The elevator filled, exhaled, filled again. A bailiff's radio crackled and sent sentences skittering across tile. I stood by the docket screen and watched names scroll in a blue-white wash. Case numbers moved like trains. 24 CV30188 slid into view and held for 3 seconds, bright as noon. People glanced, didn't care, kept moving. Crowds don't notice your storm until rain hits them. We rode up in a steel box that smelled like wool and old paper. Someone's coffee breathed sweet into the ceiling fan. A man in a winter hat rubbed his palms together. The friction made a small sound. Lydia met me outside Department 3 with a folder pinned to her ribs. Delia stood beside her, face set, the way people stand when they've already decided where the finish line is. She didn't blink as she said, "Judge Kramer took the bench early." The door opened and the courtroom space pressed its order over everything. Benches, rail, flag, air, moving in a steady line from vent to vent. The child whispered a question and her mother moved the sound into her sleeve. The clerk called our case and the words bounced up, touched wood, came back down civilized. He was already there. He chose the aisle seat, close to the center, so he could turn to the crowd and still face the judge. He liked angles that let him catch as many eyes as possible. A courtroom isn't a boardroom. The room itself is the audience. It watches with walls. He leaned in and said to his lawyer, "Let me talk." The microphone on counsel table picked the scrape of his cufflink on paper. My name on the captions stared up between them. Hert, vet, Hert. Hert, Hert. Houses survive that kind of thing. People leak. Judge Kramer looked out over his glasses. His voice didn't push. The room carried it for him. "We're here on defendant's ex parte request, to enjoin the trustee's actions, and to lift certain banking holds," he said. The words touched every pew with equal weight. Crowd space. Appearances. His attorney stood. Michael Fitch for defendant Evan Hart. I lowered my voice. "Caleb Hart, pro se," I said. The judge nodded once. "Mr. Fitch?" Fitch went into a practiced rhythm. "Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding that escalated into financial warfare. My client is prepared to address the court directly. He wishes to accept responsibility for certain aggressive steps. He wishes to make amends." He turned theatrically but not too much, and opened his palm toward the gallery. "He also intends publicly to donate a substantial portion of the property's equity to a local shelter in his mother's name. What we ask today is simple. Pause the trustee, unfreeze the accounts, and allow a family to repair itself in good faith in the open. Public confession. Designed to warm the room. He had picked his scene. He thought it was his." Judge Kramer folded his hands. "Mr. Hart," he said without looking at my son, "you'll speak through counsel. Paper first. Performance later." He turned his head slightly. "Trust." Lydia stood. "Your Honor, substitution of trustee was recorded. Instrument number 2004-118327. Notice of default likewise, the guarantor elected to cure and accelerate under the recorded addendum. A lease pendants is on file. 24 CV3118. The banking decisions Mr. Fitch calls warfare set off rights his client agreed to in writing. We've brought certified copies if the court would like to see them." The judge held out a palm, and the clerk crossed the floor in measured steps. The pages moved through air, built to carry paper straight. The judge read silently. The bench light picked out the raised notary seals. He didn't rush. He let the room feel the weight. He looked up. "Mr. Fitch, your client's apology is noted. The court doesn't enjoin recorded rights because a microphone is nearby." He lifted the top page so the margin stamp caught the light. "Injunction denied. The trustee remains. The luscious pendant stays. You may proceed in the ordinary course." My son half rose. His chair legs squealed a fraction and the bailiff's shoes said chess against the floor. He lowered himself. He had wanted the crowd's heat. He got the room's temperature instead. The judge signed the minute order. The clerk's stamp hit with a rubber thud that everyone heard. The order slid into the file and the file slid into the cart, and the cart sat in the same air we all breathed. That's how law travels. By cart, under fluorescent tubes, past people who aren't listening. We stepped into the hall and the noise took us in. Doors thumped, phones rang. The vending machine hummed with its own authority. Lydia handed me a certified copy. The purple stamp glowed brighter under cold LEDs than it had under the bench lamp. "Based on the court's order," she said, "we post the order on ex parte with the notice. Sunlight plus stamp. He doesn't get to pretend." Delia slid a handbill into my coat. 2 o'clock, she whispered. Shelter dedication. Community center. We asked for your wife's name on the sign. Bring the last envelope. The last, I asked. She smiled. Small, not for show. Legacy belongs in a room with bleachers. The community center gym breathed out its own weather. Heat from bodies, rubber from sneakers, coffee from an urn that never stops murmuring. The bleachers groaned and adjusted under weight. Light knifed in from high windows and fell in bright lanes across the floor. Kids chased dust in those lanes. Older men rubbed hands and watched them do it. Space had a pulse. A banner hung crooked until a volunteer tugged the rope. Ellen Hart Shelter and Workshop. The letters were cut from vinyl and smelled faintly like fresh paint even where there was none. I ran my fingers under the row and felt the seam where 2 strips overlapped. Imperfect. True. Pastor Tom stood at the portable mic. It squealed, corrected, found level. He lowered his voice. Thank you for coming, he said, and the room matched his volume without being asked. Delia whispered. He texted. He's coming. I nodded. I expected he would. He arrived with pace. That was always his way. A man who likes control enters like an answer. He scanned the space and dismissed the scuffed floor and the crooked banners, and the smell of gym. He went right for the mic. He slammed his hand on the stand just enough for the metal to ring and smiled at the bleachers like he was turning on lights. Neighbors, he began, and the word tried to smooth everything in its path. My father and I have had a difficult season. I accept responsibility for the pressure I placed on him. We both love this town. We both love my mother's name. He paused for the murmur he wanted. The murmur came, because crowds are generous by default. He kept going. So today I want to say this in front of the people who built me and the people who watched me stumble. I will donate the house, in her name. We will keep it in the family by giving it to the family that raised us, this community. Applause rose, tentative, then firmer, as hands looked for something to do. People like the shape of redemption even before they measure it. I walked to the center line on the floor, and let the crowd's air slip around me. The bleachers leaned forward. The banner shifted in a small draft. I waited for his breath to slow. Then I lifted the last envelope. I lowered my voice. Evan, I said, you cannot donate what you do not own. He laughed, just once, like you laugh when a chair isn't where it's always been. Dad, I'm trying here. Don't try, I said. Listen. I opened the envelope and the flap made that soft tearing sound paper makes when it joins a room. I pulled out a single-page deed, and a short letter, paper with weight. Not performance. I held both where the high windows could find them. She didn't blink as she said, read it. Delia urged from my left, not needing the mic. I read for the room, not as a speech but as a record. Deed of gift and escrow. Grantor Lydia Voss, trustee. Grantee North County Community Land Trust for the use of Ellen Hart Shelter and Workshop. Consideration, love of community. To record upon close of trustee's sale, escrow number 74, attached irrevocable instruction, signed by beneficiary Brooks Community Fund. I lifted the letter, and this letter of naming, executed this morning, stating the property proceeds and any ancillary rights shall bear Ellen's name and support the shelter's programs. The gym changed shape. Not quieter, denser. Those high windows burned brighter for a second, as a thin cloud hauled itself off the sun. Space made a choice. It wrapped the words and held them up so everyone could see their edges. He leaned in and said, you went around me. You made it impossible for me to take a bow? I asked. I kept my eyes on the bleachers, not on him. You wanted a stage? You got one. You asked for an audience. Here it is. He reached for the paper. I kept it in the light. Court order this morning. I continued, raising the certified copy so the purple stamp faced the crowd. Denied his request to pause the trustee. Case 24 CV 3118, Judge Kramer, stamped and filed. Pastor Tom moved the mic toward me. Its foam cover smelled faintly of disinfectant and the breath of people who had been brave in small ways. I didn't touch it. I just spoke near it. I'm not here to humiliate my son, I said. I'm here to end a story he started telling for me. He wanted me confused and quiet. I am neither. He shook his head, the kind of shake that asks the room to help. A few faces began to tilt away. He tried again. I was wrong. I admit it. Regret is the speech a man gives when the contract is already filed, I answered. Confession doesn't erase recorder's numbers. He pointed at the banner. You used Mom. I used her lesson, I said. Build in daylight. Name the work for the hands that did it. Don't leave your legacy in a drawer. A voice from the bleachers. Mrs. Alvarez, who ran the shelter's kitchen, cut a thin line through the air. She whispered to the row, but the room carried it farther. Ellen taught my boy to hold a hammer. This is right. A man on the top row slapped his palm on the wood once. Because some applause starts with a sino board waking up. Others followed. Not a roar. A decision. The banner moved again and found level without help. Evan's lawyer took one step, then checked himself at the free throw line. We'll challenge the election, he said to Lydia, not using the mic. Lydia didn't blink as she said, you can file anything. You can't unrecord what was recorded. You can't unserve what was served. You can't unshine a new. He went for sarcasm. Poetry from a trustee. Receipts, she corrected, and held up the clear sleeve. The plastic flashed even under dim lights that had seen too many winters. The effect wasn't lost on anyone. My son turned back to me. His voice fell to the pitch children use when the crowd's heat leaves them. What do you want, Dad? I want you to stand still long enough to hear yourself, I said. You didn't lose a house. You lost a stage. The roof will help people who don't care whether your name is on a flyer. He stared at the floor stripe between us and tried to anchor himself to paint. The stripe did what stripes do. It kept going past him. Delia stepped to the mic. For those asking what happens next, she said. Practical as a ledger. Trustees' sale proceeds fund the shelter. The land trust takes title. Caleb has signed a workshop lease in his wife's name for the East Wing. He'll teach now. If you need a warm bed or know someone who does, see me after. If you want to put your hands on something good, Pastor Tom has quilts. The crowd shifted as crowds do when given work. People stood, not to leave but to move toward tables. Space changed teams. My son finally felt what it meant to be in a room that didn't want him to speak anymore. He slammed his hand on the mic stand again, not hard, just to make it stop being available. The sound was small and didn't travel. He lowered his voice. You could have called me, he said. I heard you enough already, I answered. 6 months ago. On my windowsill, on my porch, through my door. He swallowed. Then he did what men do when there's no script left. He tried to tell the truth, or a part of it. I thought power would feel like safety, he said. Power is a tool, I said. Safety is a room. You tried to trade one for the other. He looked at the banner again. Vinyl shone. People lined up to sign volunteer sheets. Children traced letters they didn't yet know with forefingers because hands learn before eyes do. The gym had new weather now. Coffee. Wool. Winter air rushing each time the door opened and letting the banner lift, settle, lift again. He took a step back. A mother shifted to let him pass, and didn't meet his eyes. He reached the door and paused because light from the high vestibule window cut across the threshold like a yardstick. He stepped through it anyway. The door swung. It didn't slam. That would have been honest. It just closed and let the room return to the work it had chosen. Pastor Tom brought the mic down to my height. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The room already had the shape of what mattered. I reached into my coat and pulled out my wife's note, the one that lived in the metal box for years. Pay cash when you can. Pay kindness when you can't. I set it on the table where the quilts were stacked. The edge curled as if the paper wanted to go back into a pocket. I let it lie open instead. People filed past. Hands brushed hands. Coats brushed coats. The air held more warmth than it had an hour before. The banner threw a slow shadow onto the floor and the letters of her name were longer there, stretched by afternoon. Memorable lines come cheap in rooms with microphones. I kept mine small. A house is lumber and nails, I said. A home is the names we record. And one more, I added, because I wanted it for me as much as for anyone listening. You can fake regret. You cannot fake a sunrise. Later, when the bleachers emptied and the gym recovered its echo, I stood at center court and pressed my palm to that stripe. Cold paint. Honest feel. I wasn't triumphant. I was done. I carried the certified order back to the truck and slid it into the glove box with the other proofs. Paper went quiet again once it had done its work. The way hammers go quiet when the roof is on. At home, I set my hand on the window frame where my wife's ring had marked time. Outside, dusk rummaged through the street and found all the posted notices and all the little receipts taped where wind could read them. One by one they flashed once more and darkened. That's how days end, not with a door or a gavel, with light making sure it touched everything it needed to touch. I don't know what my son will be next. I know what that house will be. It's a place where breath and coats and voices stack, where quilts get unfolded, where a boy's fingers learn the curve of a chair back that fits his hand because someone made it. That's a legacy, not a donation from a microphone, a room that keeps its promise. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.